So I decided to go in the Navy. I've heard a lot of people talk about the Navy as a training school for alcoholics. I think I was one of the trainers there. I managed to make my rank all the way up to E3, and that's where I stayed. And we drank and we drank and we drank. I never went up for any other rank because I was drunk, basically. I went to Japan twice. Never brought back any of that fine electronics that they were talking back in those days when I was going there, because I was drunk, basically. All my money went to alcohol.
This is The Bottom Line. I'm Gary Thiemann in Los Angeles. Sometimes for the alcoholic, he's the last person to know he's an alcoholic. His name is Bear, a miracle comeback from the obvious throes of alcoholism.
My name is Bear, and I'm an alcoholic. My first drink came when I was about 3. I come from a family that basically transient farmers, except for my father, who managed to tie down a job with the Southern Pacific Railroad, and he worked his way up to section foreman of a labor gang. Well, being that we were stable, we seemed to be the place that all the family would come when they would be going from fields to fields, from jobs to jobs. They would always drop by, not to stay a long time, but just to drop by and visit with us. One of the primary activities when they would visit would always be drinking. At the age of about 3, I discovered a very neat thing. I was a cute kid, and when I'd walk up to one of my relatives who would be holding that bottle of whiskey or whatever in his hand, and I'd ask for a drink, and if he'd give it to me, if I would spew up just a little bit and make a little face and jump around, then I could come back and get another drink in a little while. And they would laugh, and they would think I was just the cutest little thing. Then later on in the afternoon, of course, I'd manage to just go on and go to sleep. Well, 2 things I learned coming from this type of family real early was a strong belief in God or some type of a higher power, and that alcohol made me feel wonderful. It made everything all right. It made all the pain go away, and it just made my being feel like that's where I belonged at any point in time. So this continued where I'd basically, anytime the relatives would come, I could get drink anytime I wanted to, and then I learned to really like it. As time went on, I would just use about anything I could. I got where I'd drink vanilla extract, just about anything. I remember when I'd go over and visit my uncle, who also had stabilized. He worked for a farmer, and he had a house that was kind of semi-on stilts. And underneath the house, there was sort of a powdery sand. It was always cool, no matter how hot it got outside. That powdery sand was always cool. And there was a wooden floor, and I remember that I'd go into my aunt's kitchen and steal her vanilla extract. If I downed it all real quick, I could go into the house and lay there, and I could listen to the other people walking on the wooden floors. And that was like, to me, a spiritual experience. Well, while I was learning to drink, and this was through my, age 3 through around 8 or 9, I was also going to church and learning about the traditional God. And one of the things that was very destructive to me early was when I went to my initial Bible study, I was really enthralled with these little "Jesus loves me, this I know, because the Bible tells me so" type of stuff. And that made me feel just real safe. Then when I finally got old enough to go to a regular church, being a traditionalist, fundamentalist, the first thing I walked in and heard was, "If you don't do right, God will send you straight to hell." And this, I couldn't make the connection between "Jesus loves you, this I know, because the Bible tells me so," and "you're going to hell if you think a bad thought." So it didn't take me very long. I disassociated with my Christian church and started hanging around with basically, there was a couple of shaman on the reservation where I lived, where my dad, the railroad went through the reservation. And I started hanging around with the Indians and learning a little bit about their religion. But all the time, I basically, I knew that if I had a faith and a higher power, and at that point in time I called it the creation, then no matter what happened, I'd be all right. All I had to do was just maintain that faith and keep putting one foot in front of the other. Sounds like what I'm doing today, but I knew that everything would be all right, period. I continued to drink, basically, like I said, when my relatives would come by. And I never did steal from my father's booze collection. He wasn't an alcoholic. None of the other family members of the immediate family were alcoholics. I had several uncles that were, but not in my family. So I managed to only drink when the relatives would come. Finally, when I got into high school, they found out I had a natural talent for athletics. All the way through high school, I played football, basketball, ran track. I was All-American in football, All-State in basketball, and All-Conference in track. And that made it real easy because every weekend, whatever we were having, football game, basketball game, track meet, after the game or meet, we'd all get together and we'd either drown our sorrows because we were defeated or we'd celebrate our victory. Well, that was fine my freshman and sophomore years, but by my junior and senior years, I was also running around after practice in the middle of the week with the not so athletic, not so clean-cut people, getting drunk with them and continuing to get drunk on the weekends too. So through high school, I got drunk about 4 to 5 nights a week. After high school, the only college that was looking at me was Arizona State, and that was a letter of intent. And all the other running backs were much bigger and larger, and I didn't have any confidence anyway. The alcohol had already robbed me of that. So I decided to go in the Navy. I've heard a lot of people talk about the Navy as a training school for alcoholics. I think I was one of the trainers there. Managed to make my rank all the way up to E3, and that's where I stayed, and we drank and we drank and we drank. I never went up for any other rank because I was drunk, basically. I went to Japan twice, never brought back any of that fine electronics that they were talking back in those days when I was going there, because I was drunk, basically. All my money went to alcohol. I got out of the Navy and started to college. Hot damn, it was drugs. What I found about drugs was it was quicker than alcohol. And when I didn't have money for alcohol, then drugs would suffice as a substitute. While I was going to college, one of my favorite pastimes was basically I'd go to the stacks in the library after smoking a marijuana cigarette, and I'd take a big jug of Coke and bourbon in a fast food container that they give out like at 7-Eleven or something. And I'd sit up there and read different experiments from different colleges and just sit there for hours reading. And that was pretty much my hobbies during those days. And I got through college fine. The fact is, I got through college with basically honors. But it was a blur. It was a blur. What should have been one of the most memorable times in my life was just a blur of academic involvement, which was I just read and got high. That's all I knew how to do, and I worked. By then, is my identity, who I am, what I am, was coming very strong, and I had to justify my drinking somehow. So that's how I did it. That's just who I am. That's what I do. Is I work and I study, and that's what I did. That's all I knew. And if anybody asks me why I did it, it's just what I do. Period. Finally, I got out of college, and I worked a couple of jobs. One of the first jobs I had was an area merchandise manager for a chain of stores that sold records and tapes. Well, that was really an interesting job because it was sort of expected that you will party with the salesman, and they'll give you free tickets to all the concerts, and I managed to stay drunk through most of that, and ended up quitting that job because they didn't know how to merchandise like I knew how to merchandise. And I went into a computer job, but before I could really get my teeth into that, I took a test and went with a government job. This is the first time in my life that I've actually looked at the opportunity, and that's why I stopped doing drugs, essentially. Drugs wasn't my problem. Fact is, at that point in time, I had no problem. I just had the opportunity for the first time in my life to have alcohol in my house at all times, day and night. And that's what I did. From that point on, for the next 15 years, which is pretty much a blur, I went through 2 wives and a live-in girlfriend. I never had any children because of my own selfishness, because I knew, I was smart enough at least, I knew that if I had children, they would interfere with my drinking. That would mean getting up in the middle of the night. Hell, you can't wake me up in the middle of the night. I'm usually passed out in the middle of the night. So those 15 years, I worked this government job. Somehow I managed to get through those 15 years. I went through the wives, and I moved around quite a bit inside the job, where I changed functions, and everywhere I went I was outstanding, because I just got in long enough to go crazy and change everything and get everything moving. And then fortunately I got to move out into another job function, and some of the people were beginning to recognize I had a problem, and not very many. Most people thought I just drank sometimes, but one of my techniques of drinking was I'd get up in the morning and I'd start drinking there, and I'd carry a cup around with water or coffee and vodka all day long. But each group of people I drank with, I'd only drink with basic for a couple hours, and then we would split. I'd go drink with another group. This is what I did for 15 years. During this 15 years, and this is what I call my last drunk, is these 15 years in which I consumed a half gallon of vodka each day, every day, come rain or shine. During this 15 years, I don't remember much of it. I know it's just like my college days. I excelled, and I had no fear. I think really what got me through the 15 years was God. God got me through because He knew that I loved Him. And every time anything came down, I'd pray to God. I'd thank God for what He did for me and ask Him to let me do good the next day and the next morning. And basically, during this 15 years that my blood alcohol content was on the illegal side the entire time, I very seldomly showed, or very seldom anybody knew that I was intoxicated. One night after a club meeting that I was in, I was up on a mountain, I was near a ski resort. We had had the meeting. Then after the meeting, some of us went over to a bar, and at this bar, we continued to drink. It was one of the few times that my tongue got thick, and my gait got a little wobbly, and I realized I shouldn't drive. But that particular night, I decided I was going to drive anyway, so I got in my car and I drove down one of the most dangerous stretches of the highway in Southern California. When I got home, I got down on my knees to thank God for safe delivery. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the presence of God. For the first time in my life, I felt fear. The fear that I felt is something that's just total, unbelievable fear. I felt vulnerable. The wires in my legs from the accidents that had happened, and the wires that hold my bones together, I could feel like they weren't holding them together right. I felt for the first time all the scar tissues on my body. I felt weak. The bones I'd broken, the calcium deposits, in my mind. For the first time in my life, I felt small and I felt alone. I'd never felt this before. And I realized my best friend, alcohol, had robbed me of my existence with God.
Having lost that contact with God was such a devastating experience for Bear, he knew he had to get help. But just one more drink, and then another, and then another.
I was at a training meeting sitting in about 70 miles from home, and this is a training meeting that is required in my job function, that you must attend these meetings 5 days a year, every year, in order to maintain your employment status. And it was at that training meeting that to this day, I firmly believe the hand of God reached out, touched me on the shoulder, and said, "Go now." I got up out of class. I told the instructor, I have to leave. I went home, and I didn't even know how to tell this to my wife. My wife had been watching me drink, right? And she doesn't know I'm an alcoholic, right? And so instead of just coming out and saying I'm an alcoholic and I'm going to get some help, I realized, I'm going to have to go into a program somewhere. So the first thing I say to my wife is, "How would you feel if I spoiled our vacation?" Well, of course, she doesn't understand what's going on, and initially there's the problem, and then she looks at my face, and this proud Irish Indian shows fear for the first time. She's never seen it before. She's never even seen me frown, and she saw the fear in me. She saw something that she just melted and said, "Whatever you need to do, you better do." So we called a person that we knew that was aware of different treatment programs within the area that we lived. And from there, she told us to come on into town. We went on into town. She made some phone calls and got me to go out where my insurance would cover it, and walked me right into the place where I was going to spend the next 28 days. And they looked at me and says, "How often and how much have you been drinking?" And well, a half gallon a day for 15 years. So they immediately sent me to a hospital. As I stayed there in the hospital, I used one of the old techniques I used when I was drinking. I met the doctor in the hallway one day, and I leaned up against the wall, put my hand on my thigh, and acted like I was stable. And I said, "Well, doctor, when am I going to get to leave here?" And he said, "Well, you're looking pretty good. How you feeling?" I said, "I'm fine." He said, "Okay, you can leave tonight." Then I went shivering off, shaking off down the hallway, and he didn't know that I still was totally bizarre. But I got to go on to the 28-day program. And I can remember walking into the double doors that night, going into that hallway. Those double doors, I hit one side with my shoulder and almost hit the other side because I couldn't walk. The detoxification process was extremely hard on me. While I was in the hospital and through this time, I continued to pray to God to please, please come back to me, or please, please let me come back to you.
Having had a spiritual awakening, Bear found solace through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, where he admitted he was an alcoholic and that his life had become unmanageable.
But the fear of going back to drinking and having to live an existence in which I cannot find my God again was enough pressure that I did indeed start going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's amazing. One of the first things I found out was something that's real in all aspects of life. What you listen to is what you hear. It's really that simple. When I listened to the problems, I heard the problems. When I listened to the solutions, I heard the solutions. And it got to the point to where I realized life is about solutions, not about problems. The only way a problem can really hinder anybody is when your reaction to the problem becomes a problem.
As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Live on in my love. All this I tell you, that my joy may be yours, and your joy may be complete. Love one another as I've loved you. There is no greater than to lay down your life for your friends. Live on in my love. Live on in my love. There is no greater love than this, than to lay down your life for your friends. Live on in my love. It was not you who chose me, it was I who chose you. Live on in my love. Know that I chose you to go forth and bear fruit. Bear the fruit that must endure. All that you ask of the Father, in my name He will give to you. The command that I give is that you love one another. Live on in my love. Live on in my love. There is no greater love than this, than to lay down your life for your friends. Live on in my love. Live on in my love. There is no greater love than this, than to lay down your life for your friends. Live on in my love.
You've been listening to The Bottom Line, featuring Bear's story. Bear, thank you so much for caring enough to share your message. We really appreciate it. This show is produced for Armed Forces Radio, heard worldwide. I'm Gary Thiemann. Until next time, God bless you. And share the message, won't you? This has been a GRT production.